All right, everybody, welcome back. It is Monday. I'm Matt Lewis. He is Charlie Sykes. And Charlie, I'm psyched to see you, man. How are you?
Well, at least I got back. I got out of the Washington D.C. before the storm hit, the big storm yesterday. Have you been hammered by that?
Nothing compared to what we got
Okay.
a few weeks ago, but New York City, man, wow, it looks
I know.
pretty
Yeah.
nasty. So,
So anyway, I was at the Principals First conference, which is it's sort of they kind of a Woodstock for centrists. The center right, center left, Woodstock. Lots of comments about our conversations. I wanted to pass that on to you. A lot of people said that they watch this and they enjoy it. So
that is great.
we have a very high quality audience, but it was a very interesting. It was a very interesting event.
That is great to hear. I hear lots of positive feedback. So I guess we're going to get renewed. We're not going to be canceled. We're
That's
going
right.
to get another
We are
season.
we're not going to be canceled. Um, normally I got to tell you, normally I don't watch the State of the Union addresses live because I would like to have a life and I don't want to spend my evenings. I'm actually somewhat intrigued about the rage speech that's going to take place tomorrow night. I kind of feel maybe it's the sense that you're going to watch some sort of a car crash. I mean, all of the previews about this is a crucial speech or all eyes are on the speech. It's never true. The State of the Union never changes the trajectory. But tomorrow, I think watching Trump face to face with the Supreme Court justices who just slapped him from, here to eternity. And he spent the entire weekend insulting them. That's going to be interesting. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say never, right? Didn't Joe Biden have one that actually reassured people that he came out and gave the old man could stay awake for an hour at
Yeah,
9 o'clock at night, and so I think
well,
it
that
can matter here and
maybe.
there.
Well, I mean, I'm
But
thinking of some of the speeches where all you remember is, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert screaming at the thing. Now, the Democrats are going to boycott, right? I mean, a lot of them are not going to show up. I don't know what the right answer is.
yeah, I don't either. I don't think there is a right answer. Actually, they've tried wearing like all white outfits. There's multiple different things you can do to protest.
Yeah.
But look, to me, the interesting thing will be there's two options Trump has because truthfully, the state of our union is bad. Things are not good. And the polls are very clear. The majority of Americans are not happy with the direction, with all sorts of things.
50% is a
Yeah. So I think Trump really has two options and maybe a combination. Right? One option is he gaslights us, right? He talks about how great things are. And I'm sure that's the written part of the speech.
right.
But then the question is, does Trump, it's maybe hard to ad lib during the speech because you're reading the teleprompter, but Trump
Yeah.
probably can't help himself. And there will be a time when his need for vengeance and anger kicks in. And that to me will be when the popcorn comes out.
Yeah. I mean, we can all fantasize about the moment when he leans forward and says, "Fuck you, John Roberts, you loser." Now that's probably not going to happen. But on a serious note, the decision last Friday, throwing out the tariffs, I think was a very big deal. And, I've sort of been stress testing my reaction to it, thinking that, okay, the Supreme Court has actually, you know, provided a constitutional guardrail. Actually, the more I read it, the more I read Roberts' decision and Gorsuch's decision, the better it is. Do you see David French's column in the New York Times? He thinks this is one of the most important decisions of our time
Mhm.
because it really did reaffirm the importance of the separation of powers and all of the Constitution's grant of power to Congress. And if you indulge me for a moment, Justice Scalia, the late Justice Scalia, would always argue the thing that was most distinctive about the U.S. Constitution was not the Bill of Rights, because lots of countries had Bill of Rights, the bills of rights. What was distinctive was the separation of power, the three branches of government, and that argument just ran through the majority opinions. And I think this is a
Yeah.
very positive step and a really significant blow to Trump.
I have a lot to say here. I like Scalia a lot. He's probably my favorite justice. Um, Charlie, I was the kind of person that was saying, look, I don't want the Supreme Court to save Trump from himself. The truth is, Trump is unpopular, but the real reason is the economy and affordability. If the American public felt that they were doing better financially, they wouldn't care quite so much about ICE,
Yeah.
actually. Sad to say that, but liberal
Yeah.
democracy, that doesn't move the needle when we're fat and happy. Um, but it turns out that Trump isn't going to actually listen to the Supreme Court anyway, right? He's imposed these 15% tariffs
They
using a
gave him a
different
gift
method.
and he's not taking it, right? They gave him an
Yeah.
offer and he's not taking it. Yeah.
So, like, yeah, you're trying to like save Trump from himself and he won't be saved. But doesn't that also raise the question of like, does the separation of powers really matter? If Trump can find a way, if he can find a way around whatever the Supreme Court tells him not to do and just do it using a different method,
Yeah.
then is David French actually right about about the separation of powers being, the saving grace?
Well, we're going to find out. The court, I thought, not only handed Trump a big defeat, but it also laid down the gauntlet to Congress. Say, hey, wake up, guys! You need to be more aggressive. So the question is, are we starting to see a turning where the court is recognizing what the constitutional stakes are, whether Congress will or not? No, part of this Trump refusing the off ramp is number one the authority, and I don't want to get too wonky because neither of us are lawyers here, but people that I respect are saying that his new tariffs are also going to be illegal. They're going to end up in court. They're probably going to be thrown out as well. Also, the new tariffs will require Republicans in Congress to vote for massive taxes on their own constituents. So
Mhm.
I do think that we're in a very interesting moment. The other big question,
Well, they would
yeah,
after 5 or 6 months, right? I mean,
well,
theoretically, Trump can do this for like 150 days or something, and
right.
then it would require congressional
So,
approval
what happened? Where are we going to be in
right
five,
around the
6 months?
midterms,
Right
right?
around the midterm.
Yeah.
My big question is whether or not the court is going to apply this very, very eloquent statement of the importance of, the legislative branch as the bulwark of liberty, whether they're going to apply that to other issues as well. And there are some commentators who say, if this is what the court has decided, you're going to see this applied in a lot of other areas. And a lot of the things that Trump thought that he could just simply do by executive fiat are not actually going to happen. So we're going to see. But this was a win. I would urge people to read Justice Gorsuch's concurring opinion because it's a real statement of what constitutional conservatism or conservative constitutionalism used to look like. And the fact
Let
that
me
it was
ask you
kind of a
this, Charlie.
bipartisan decision was also encouraging, I thought.
Kind of, but there were 3 Republican appointees
I know.
who dissented. And, we mentioned Scalia, but I think, Alito was known as Scalito or something at one point.
Wrongly.
Thomas was said to have just voted with Scalia all the time. I think that was one of the knocks on Thomas when Scalia was alive. And, you and I are not lawyers. Maybe we could get our emergency call to David French in right now,
Mhm.
but do you have any sense, is there a coherent theory about with what the dissenters are up to, or is it just as simple as they are hacks, and we could just assume that those 3 are going to vote for Donald Trump, whatever he says?
Well, I'm going to lean toward the latter there because this was a very, very clear cut case. Number one, the emergency law that Trump cited does not even mention tariffs. Number two, the Constitution black letter law specifically says that tariffs and taxes need to be levied by Congress. So this is a no brainer. So yes, that is distressing.
Mm.
If I'm making the case for, constitutional conservatism is making a return. Well, no, it's pretty distressing. Weak word.
Hmm.
That 3 members of the court actually said that the president should be treated like a king. But at this point, it's inconceivable to me. And there are people like Andy McCarthy from National Review who say, look, this is a slam dunk. This is what conservatives have believed forever. So what is the explanation
Right.
for those 3 going along with this? But I'm going to take the win. I think
Yeah.
we needed that
Yeah.
win.
Well, let me say something positive, which is rare.
Yeah,
Um, I don't think Republicans deserve, and conservatives don't deserve very much credit for anything the last decade. But there are some of these judges like Amy Coney Barrett who if you're a liberal watching us, you may disagree with her
yeah,
philosophy, but I think you have to respect that she is really attempting to interpret the Constitution in an originalist or textualist manner, and that she is trying to actually
I think so.
not, she's not siding with her team. It's not tribalism. It's actually principles, and thank God for that. That they're not all hacks.
I agree with you, and I think this is a reminder that conservative constitutionalists, and by the way, these people don't have to run in Republican primaries, so they can actually do the right thing. But
Yeah, good point.
conservatism is not the same as MAGA. And by the way, Donald Trump hates it. So let's talk about Donald Trump's reaction. I mean, it was disgraceful. Wall Street Journal said this may have been the lowest moment in his presidency. I think there's been so many others, but you could tell that, I mean, how upset he was about this. But the vicious, what do you make of the vicious personal attacks which continue? Did you see this morning what he wrote? That he's, because he's got the mental acuity and discipline of an, 8-year-old. My apologies to 8-year-olds. So I'm not going to spell out Supreme Court in caps anymore. I'm going to put it in lowercase to show my total lack of respect. Okay, how does that help him to insult and attack the justices who probably hold the fate of his presidency in their hands at some point?
Yeah, it's so crazy, right? If I were Donald Trump, I would have taken the W. I would have been. I mean, well, I imagine like Bill Clinton thinking, I really hope the Supreme Court strikes that down so I get this economy back. And then, you're like, it's a win-win. I get to like, well, we tried our best to do the tariffs, but they wouldn't let us. So now we're going to have to fix it would be, Trump really needs the economy to get better. He
Yeah.
really needs affordability to come down. This would have helped, and he can't take the W. He can't,
No,
he
but
just
also going
can't,
to war with the
he
Supreme
can't do
Court
it.
is, yeah, no, the war with the Supreme Court is not a winner for him.
Well,
I
Trump is
saw some,
like,
yeah,
Trump is like basically, look, he's managed to win a couple of these elections when people thought he couldn't. And so it's bestowed him with this like sense that he can do no wrong, that these so-called
hubris,
experts, yeah, and
arrogance.
right. And what happens when you go too far with that? When you invade one too many, when you go under Moscow in the winter, you know what I mean? Like
Oh,
you
I
get
knew
the
know what
sense
you mean.
eventually your luck runs out. So
Well, no, and going up against the court is not a winner. I mean, I saw these poll numbers over the weekend, and something like we're close to 80% of Americans who think no, the president should not defy the Supreme Court. This is not a fight that he really wants. I mean, either politically or substantively. And you mentioned the hubris. So another serious note. Um, and I guess I thought about it after. I mean, I had hundreds of conversations at this conference over the weekend, and then I realized afterwards. The one thing that nobody was talking about, and I think it's true of everyone in America. It's not just this conference. Nobody's talking about the fact that we may be 5 minutes away from a major war.
yeah,
I don't think there's ever been a time in American history where where we were this close to a major war. Not only was Congress not part of the discussion at all, but I would say that 9 out of 10 Americans could not tell you right now, okay, so what is this war about? Why are we about to do
yeah.
all
Didn't
of
we
this? It's a
obliterate their
weird
nuclear?
moment.
We obliterated their nuclear program a few
I was
months
told
ago.
this.
So
Yeah,
and by the way, if you'll indulge me in a second, I'm going to read from the New York Times because I think there's some stuff in here about Iran
for
that
sure. Yeah,
really
please.
deserves our attention. But did you see Trump the other day when he was talking about tariffs? And he was basically saying, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was basically saying, like, the courts say I can't impose tariffs, but I can do whatever I want in Iran. I can blow them off the face of the
I could
map. And
destroy a country. Yes, right.
yeah. Um, and I'm like, maybe that's a problem, really. The fact that he actually, like, you don't need congressional approval to do that. And I understand why, the history of why that is, but it is like Trump probably sees this as like the one area where he's unchecked. He can actually do whatever he
Yes,
wants and
right.
they can't stop him.
Right. On the other hand, though, you would think we keep talking about how other presidents would handle it. If you're about to put men and women in harm's way, shouldn't
Yeah.
you be preparing public opinion for that? Shouldn't you be talking about it? It's like not part of the national conversation at all. And, God forbid that there are casualties, American casualties, because I think that will be a disaster for him. Now, you talked about how he, feels the wind at his back and the hubris and everything. So far, all of his military operations have been one and done.
Hmm.
Go in, clean, no casualties, and so he thinks that these things are easy, and maybe it will be again in Iran. I mean, we hope that there are no casualties, but what happens if the Iranians blow up an American ship? What is the reaction going to be? This is not going to be one of those rally around the flag moments that other
Yeah.
presidents have counted on.
Or
And the rally
sleeper
around the,
cells, retaliation, terrorism.
you know,
Or let me read this a little bit. I hate to read so much, but did you see this piece in the New York Times about Iran this morning?
no, I don't
Mr.
think so.
Trump's lead negotiator with Iran, Steve Witkoff, described the president as, quote, curious as to why they haven't capitulated in an interview with Fox News over the weekend. The vice president, J.D. Vance, told Fox last week that despite the threat of war, Iranians are not yet willing to actually acknowledge and work through the president's demands. This is a quote here. For Iran, submitting to U.S. terms is more dangerous than suffering another U.S. strike, said Ali Vaez, the Iran director of the International Crisis Group. Quote, they don't believe that once they capitulate, the U.S. will alleviate the pressure. They believe that would only encourage the U.S. to go for the jugular,
They're
unquote.
not wrong.
Ayatollah Khomeini has repeatedly stressed his view that Washington's eventual aim is to topple Iran's system of governance. Quote,
Yes.
nuclear energy is not the problem, nor are human rights. America's problem is with the very existence of the Islamic Republic, he said in 2024.
Yeah.
Danny Citronowitz, an expert at the Atlantic Council who previously headed the Iran branch of Israel's defense intelligence, said that beyond strategic calculations like the ballistic missiles, Ayatollah Khomeini insists on uranium enrichment as, quote, a pillar of the regime itself. If Iran's leaders concede on those points, quote, they will actually undermine the existence of the regime itself. He said, I think they don't have any other choice than to take the bet on a military strike. It goes on to, I could keep going on and on, but this goes on to talk about the possibility of ground troops. Um,
I
so,
can't
yeah.
imagine. Donald Trump is not the kind of guy who's going to do that, and I do wonder whether he'd be able to take a punch. Look, I wrote back earlier during the first strikes that look, under normal circumstances, is the world better off if Iran doesn't have nukes? Absolutely. Would the world be better off if it did not have the mullahs in charge? Absolutely. On the other hand, um, do you really want to go to war with this president? Donald Trump as a wartime president is erratic. He's dangerous. There's all kinds of negative consequences. And the question that we always have to ask is what happens next? So let's say this is massively successful. Let's say that we go in there and we kill Khomeini. We decimate the Islamic Republic. All right, Matt. You broke it. You own it. What do you do with it? I mean, Iran is a really big country. It is much larger than Iraq. It's very, very complicated. What do we think? We kick them out of office, and are we bringing back the Shah? Um, who's in charge of Venezuela? So anyway, I just find it so fascinating that we are this close to a war, and it's really not a part of the conversation. That most Americans are just not fixated on it. So if Donald Trump thinks that, okay, I've all got, I'm, sucking in the polls and all of these things, and I need a distraction. Every time you go to war, there's a rally around the flag. That is not going to happen. So,
I mean,
okay,
and
and
the
I would,
other thing
yeah,
too is like the idea of the limited war that Trump wants, right? So like
right.
it's more likely what we would do in Iran, what we did in Venezuela, where you just topple Maduro, but you end up with his regime
Right.
still running the show, which it avoids the mistake of Iraq 20,
Yeah.
2003. But at that point, it's more about PR for Trump. It's more about posturing than it is about actual regime change because you're not actually changing the regime. And I don't think you might be able to intimidate Venezuela and get, what's her name, Delcy, whatever, to play ball out of fear of intimidation. I don't think that's going to
Yeah.
happen with the second or third in command of a.
I
And,
don't
and,
know.
and this New York Times article goes on to say that they learned from the last attack, um, and they have now prepared. But Tehran learned lessons from the last war. Iranian and regional officials say, and has prepared several layers of leadership to replace anyone killed.
Yeah.
This aims to ensure that the system survives the conflict, even if Ayatollah Khamenei and other leaders did not. So they are ready for Trump's sort of
I
psychological
know.
approach to this.
Well, look, I mean, this is a cliche, but all war plans are basically, turned to ashes the moment the first shots are fired. And anybody in the military will tell you that. So the idea that we'll go in with this limited plan. Well, what happens if you have a battleship that's blown up? Well, then you have to retaliate. Then you have to escalate. What happens if, and again, we don't want to see any of those things happen. And meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to behave like a well-oiled machine. Can we just talk about Kash Patel for a moment?
We should, yeah.
Okay, now
So,
far be it from me as a Wisconsinite to throw shade on somebody drinking beer, celebrating a sports victory. But you want to talk about that moment where you realize that this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the director of the FBI jumping around. And there's not like there's not other things to do. There's possibly a war in Iran. Somebody tried to
yeah.
blow up Mar-a-Lago. You have the Guthrie case. You have all of these important things going on, and he is jet setting around the world. His spokesman lies about whether or not he's going to go to the Olympics. When you see those pictures, remember this is on the taxpayer's dime. And the reason this story broke was because apparently dozens of FBI and DOJ employees saw the video and just, it is
Yeah.
rocketed around because, like, can you believe this chode that he's doing this? What an embarrassment.
I'm sure everyone's seen it. I probably don't need to read about it. But anyway, the FBI director, Kash Patel, chugged beer and sprayed all over members of the American men's hockey team following their gold medal win in Italy on Sunday.
Haven't we all done?
While at home, the agency was navigating multiple urgent issues, including the Secret Service shooting dead an armed man who entered President Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida. I do have questions about this. It seemed like apparently Kash Patel is actually a big hockey fan,
Yeah.
which interesting. It seemed like the players. No, look, they're celebrating. They're playing Toby Keith's, "Angry American" or whatever that song was.
Fine. Yeah.
I get it. This was I think their first gold medal since the
It's
Miracle
wonderful. It's a
on
wonderful
Ice.
American moment, and
Yeah,
shitified by the presence of Cash Patel. I mean, that's what I feel about it. I mean, it's like, this
yeah.
is like the miracle on ice. All of Americans should celebrate. Cash Patel decides he's going to crash it and then shitify it. Why is the head of the FBI there? And by the way, they had been, when Ken Delaney has reported a couple of days ago, that the Cash Patella had just set it off there and was partying at the Olympics. The FBI spokesman, the official spokesman, denied it. He issued these firm things. Your rag outlet wrote that Patel went to hang out at the Olympics on the taxpayer dime, even when we provided information that your theory was false. And yet there he is, Cash Patel partying on the taxpayer's dime. Well, by the
Does he?
way, other shit is happening in the world that the
Yeah.
FBI director should be monitoring. Assassination attempt. What's going on in Mexico right now? Whatever.
I mean, he's obviously a farce, a joke to be the
Yeah.
FBI director anyway. Was he friends? Like, had he made friends with them? Because I would be pissed. If I just won the gold medal, I would be pissed if some politician showed up to celebrate and steal some of the glory. They didn't seem to be pissed about that. I wonder if
Look,
he is.
you know what? They're not thinking about being pissed. They're just celebrating. I mean, this is like the greatest moment in their lives. They know they've been immortalized. They don't care. There are moments in your life where you're just so high on just the wonderfulness of it that suddenly the worst asshole in the world is, I don't care.
Yeah,
I just don't.
that's
But again,
fair.
this is a reminder, though. I've used that analogy about, a clown with a flamethrower still has a flamethrower. This is the game that cannot shoot straight, but they're still shooting. By the way, so I woke up yesterday morning in Washington, D.C. First thing on my phone, it was the notice from the airline saying there will be no TSA pre-check.
Right.
So you have to
That's
show up
bad
to the
news
airport.
if you're like let me tell you, Charlie, I've got TSA pre-check, I've got clear. I've done the TSA pre-check. I do both because you could do clear TSA pre-check. I've done clear concierge where they will meet you at the
Aren't
curb.
you special?
They will escort you not only to the clear TSA pre-check line, but to the front of the TSA clear pre-check line. So if you are like us, frequent flyers who are obsessed with I'm not afraid of flying. I'm afraid of airports. I hate airports. And so I will buy whatever I can get to avoid like the chance of being late. I'm also hyper vigilant. That's one of my other problems. So
You need to have an entourage. I mean, I'm now
I need
envisioning Matt
people.
Lewis, being greeted by the concierge, like a group of guys with things in their ears, leading
No,
you
no.
to
It's
all. Yeah.
high maintenance, but not because I'm important or think I'm important, because I'm neurotic and I hate
Okay,
airplanes.
I have
It's
an
a
anecdote to tell
difference.
you about this in a moment. Okay, so the first thing I see is, there's no, pre-check because obviously, imagine what the impact would be with this big storm in the Northeast. And what are you doing? You're injecting this massive chaos into the transportation system. Within, I think, 2 hours, they had reversed position. They heard from the wrong people, apparently. I mean, they stepped on the wrong toes because all of the entitled and privileged people like us who have pre-check, extreme bloody murder. So they reversed that decision, and so there was pre-check after all. So what a well-oiled machine
Yes.
this administration is.
Do
All right.
what you want to the immigrants, but leave my pre-check alone.
Okay. I'm going to tell you an anecdote that I heard, and I'm going to leave out the name because I was asked to. Okay, so a guy is on the train, going to, I can't remember if it was, to or from New York, I think, on Amtrak, and he's with a very prominent, let's say, a former government official who has been subject to many death threats and has been targeted by Donald Trump at the very highest level. You would recognize the name. Let me just put it that way. And so they're on the train, and then they see an attractive woman, in the same car, and they're not sure they recognize her, but they have a suspicion. They get to the train station, and there are all of these New York police providing this woman, Megyn Kelly, with a police escort. Now, this very prominent person who has been subject to death threats is completely on his own. He has to get out there with his own bag. And
Yeah.
Megyn freaking Kelly gets a police escort. Now, she's not even on Fox News anymore. She's
Yeah.
a podcaster. So a
Yeah.
podcaster gets the police entourage, whereas this person whose name you would recognize is like, what the heck? Nothing. So I don't know.
There's no
We'll
bigger
see.
celebrity than an attractive woman. You could actually be a celebrity. She is. But
Yeah.
yeah, police escort. Crazy world. Um, Charles, I want to ask you. You were at this
Yeah. Yeah. Woodstock.
yeah, the Woodstock. I don't want to call it the nerd prom. That was
Yeah.
the White House
Uh-huh.
Correspondence Center. I forget what CPAC used to have a nickname, but we'll call this
Star
conservative
Wars
Woodstock.
varsity of the conservative movement. Yeah.
So this is partly never Trumpers and then partly people that might be called what anti Trump maybe, or this
No,
is
no, this is actually a
hardcore never
principles
Trump.
first. Well, there are hardcore never Trump. Everybody's never Trump, but what makes principles first, I think, somewhat different. And all credit to Heath Mayo, who is the founder of it. He has kept it centrist. So you do have, old time Republicans. You do have people who still consider themselves conservatives. You have people who are in the center. You have people center left, who are there. And they're all wrestling with this issue of where we go. There was a piece in the New York Times about sort of the difference of opinion. There are some people clinging to what I regard as the delusion that they can bring the Republican Party back. I heard people saying our goal is to elect a legacy Republican in 2028. And I'm thinking, oh my God, have you been paying attention
Nikki
to
Haley
anything?
2020.
Yeah, no,
It's gonna happen,
we're, we're,
Charlie.
we're
Keep
trying to
hope
talk things.
alive.
Okay, worse than that, trying to talk themselves into, oh, Marco Rubio would be so much better than, say,
Well, that is what I wanted
Rubio.
to ask you about because
Mhm.
there was a big piece. I think it was Axios or something
Yeah.
that was saying that Donald Trump, he's sort of floating Rubio versus Vance, or he's trying to decide. He's asking people, should it be Rubio or Vance? And he said there was a quote in there where Trump says, like Vance goes at him hammer and tong, but Rubio killed him with the velvet glove, something like that.
Well, let them have that fight, but clearly, in terms of our discussions, we have not gone through the last 10 years to end up with MAGA light Marco Rubio, and I don't even want to get into it. So there were discussions about, well, who would you vote for between AOC and Marco Rubio? I said, look, I'm never going to vote for Marco Rubio. I will say that there was a strong consensus among I think the smarter people that Marco Rubio would probably beat ELC in the general election. And I do not see that as a positive development. It's like, please let this cup pass from us.
Yes.
Go through all of this and have that kind of choice. And I mean, the thing about Marco Rubio is, first of all, I do not buy the line that he was great in Munich. I think,
Me
who was
neither.
at one session where people were saying, that he was much more sober than JD Vance talking about Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, because he never even mentioned it. He didn't even bring it up. But Marco Rubio has been there and has been supportive of everything Donald Trump has done in 2.0.
Yeah.
Every single thing that we are talking about, Marco Rubio is right there. And so for people to say that somehow that he is going to be the acceptable Republican from the centrist point of view, no. But there was some buzz. By the way,
Yeah.
what the other big debate was in this group
Mm.
was, and I'll probably talk about this later. Um, is the worst past or is the worst to come? And there are
Mm.
people who are saying, we've gone through the worst, and we've hit a turning point, and things are going to get better, and after 2028, things will snap back. And then there are the darker views, like, no, in fact, the worse things get for Donald Trump, the more dangerous it gets, and the
Yeah.
possibility of real anti-constitutional and constitutional and violence rises. And I will tell you that I was in the second
Mm.
category.
I don't want to linger too much on Rubio, but I will say I was listening to Michael Weiss on the Bulwark podcast last week, and he argued that, and he is not a naive, quixotic
No,
Rubio fan
Mark
either,
not. No.
but he did say that if Rubio wasn't in his position, that he thinks Ukraine would have already fallen to Russia. Um, I don't think I misrepresent. That's what I heard, at least.
Okay.
That's what I think he said. So maybe it's good that he's there, but that doesn't mean that he is any sort of hero or that we should make him the great Cuban hope for for Reaganite conservatism.
No, he's just made too many compromises, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. And look, I'm going to concede that in Trump 1.0, I don't think we fully appreciated, or I did not fully appreciate how important it was to have grown-ups in the room. I don't know about you, but I was very, very critical. Like, why are you part of this? Why are you, staying there? Because, you think that you can make a difference. Well, in retrospect, they did, in the Justice Department, in the military. We're very, very fortunate that quite frankly, that Mike Pence made that decision. We're fortunate that we
Yeah.
had people in the Department of Justice who told the president that his lies about the election were bullshit. We were very fortunate to have people like Mark Milley in the U.S. military at that time. So, and they're all gone now. So sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until it is gone. But I am not yet prepared to give Marco Rubio any credit for these things.
I am so torn on this second question because I not the second question, but I'm very torn on the question of people who save Trump from himself. That question, right? Because on one
Yeah,
hand,
right.
look, I think Mike Pence is clearly someone we needed because that was that moment where you were literally attempting to overturn the election, to have certified different slates of electors and all that. That was very scary for preservation of democracy. But at other points, I think these normies, these guardrails, these establishment folks, the deep state, if you want to call them that, did sort of save Trump from himself. And it might have been better if some bad things had happened, if they had allowed some bad things to happen. Um,
I'm
because
just against bad
otherwise,
things. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get your point, but at
yeah,
some point, I want good things to happen to America. And so if you can stop something really horrible from happening to America, this is a positive thing. I really I know exactly where you're coming from, but I don't want to fall into that trap of seeing everything from, does it help
yeah,
Trump or hurt Trump? I mean, there are millions of Americans out there, and I don't want them to be plunged
yeah,
into a depression. I don't want to see them
yeah.
destroyed. I don't want to see massive firestorms and global warming and measles epidemics sweeping through. You know what really hurt Donald Trump? Millions of kids dying of measles. Fine. Please save Trump from Trump by stopping that from happening. I mean,
What if Charlie. what, what if that means that Donald Trump has a rebound in popularity and finds a way to stay on for a third term? But
I say,
if something bad had happened, he wouldn't have. I mean, this gets ridiculous, and it's like,
no, no. I don't think he's going to have a
no, no,
rebound in popularity, which is why I think that it's dangerous. And I think the line I used yesterday, I did a one-on-one with Michael Steele, the former RNC chairman. And I said, we need to recognize that a lot of things that we think are really, really bad for Trump are actually, going to make things very dangerous. I'm not saying just as a realist that um, a a a rabid cornered orange ferret is very, very dangerous. And as he drops into the 30s, and as he realizes the power is going to be taken away from him, and he becomes desperate, he will engage in desperate measures. And this is not speculative. I mean, we need to remind people this is a man who already incited a mob to try to overturn the election. When we ask, what is Donald Trump capable of? It's like, wait, have you forgotten what he's already done? What he would have done? What would he have done on January 6th if he had controlled the U.S. military? What would he have done? Well, he did control the U.S. military, but if he had, none of those adults in the room, what if he had a DOJ that would do anything he wanted? What would he have done if he didn't have Mike Pence there? What would he have done? Run through the list if he had the brute squads of ICE and all of that, because we may face that. And I think that you have to balance out yeah, bad things for Trump are good for the country, but bad things for Trump also create new dangers.
indeed. All right, two more stories, quick, and then we can call it a day. Charlie, did you see this? Donald Trump wants to send a hospital ship to Greenland.
I love this story.
And so here's the funny part. I don't have the quotes, but they're hilarious because Greenland's like, we do not want this. We do not need this. We have free healthcare here.
Yes.
There's not an emergency. And then come to find out,
Apparently, there's no hospital ship either.
no,
So
there's not. But the other funny thing is, Charlie, come to find out if you read paragraph 10 or 11 of the
yeah,
story I was reading, Greenland saved an American under distress, a submariner. And I think that's why Trump is doing this. Trump is embarrassed that Greenland saved an American. And so he is concocting this false story about sending a non existent hospital ship to help Greenland. It's insane.
it is so insane, and I'm glad you used that word. It's like he puts this out on Truth Social, and because to help them deal with their health problem. And the Danes in Greenland, they're going, what is the problem here? It's just completely made up. But maybe this is just sort of this stuff he throws up against the wall when he feels he needs kind of a distraction, so that you and I will spend a few minutes. Now, speaking of another story, can we talk about the Netflix story for a moment? I don't know if I mentioned that when we were
Mm-mm.
talking earlier.
Our
Okay.
extensive pregame 2 hour long conversation
Yeah, that's right.
did not come up.
In the room with all the producers. So this is serious, and I don't want it to be below people's radar screen. And it feels like this dystopian chapter of the story of a country slipping into authoritarianism. Now we know that Netflix wants to buy Paramount, right? And so does I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm confusing all of the characters, but Netflix wants government approval for major acquisitions. Donald Trump has decided that Susan Rice, former Obama official, needs to be fired from the Netflix board because she's criticized Donald Trump, and basically telling Netflix, nice company you have there, I will destroy your deal if you do not fire Susan Rice from your board. Now, this is one of those moments where it is the naked, raw use of authoritarian power. Viktor Orban is going, man,
Mm,
I wouldn't have tried. I mean, it's
yeah.
a little rough there, Donald. But it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, because Donald Trump knows he has these big corporate media companies by that he can grab them,
Yep.
and he's had success going back to our previous conversation. He thinks nobody's going to stop me. We'll keep doing this sort of thing. But what he's doing right now, just people ought to pay attention to see whether Netflix, because I think the pressure on Netflix to throw Susan Rice under the bus is going to be really intense. And
Indeed.
I'm not going to be shocked if they if they cave into Trump on this.
And no presidents, no past presidents thought this was possible. I mean, hopefully they wouldn't have wanted to do this sort of thing. But even if they did, they would have thought you just can't get away with it. So
Yeah,
even if Trump goes away, Charlie, he has taught the next authoritarian some
yeah,
major lessons in terms of
yeah. It's the Warner
permission
deal, buddy.
structure. Yeah,
That's right. I
and
agree.
it may, and even if it takes a decade or 20 years before the next person tries it, good Lord willing, he has exposed faults and problems that we're going to have to. Not everything can be fixed. There are certain things I think we should try to fix. Like, for example, a president shouldn't just be able to pardon whoever they want. That's a
Oh,
that's a big fix, but we should
hard
try
fix.
to
It's
fix
hard
it.
fix. I
It's
think
probably a
I
constitutional
totally
amendment
agree.
to fix that, right?
Okay,
All
so
right.
before we go,
Yeah.
we only do this once a week. The developments in the Epstein files in the last week, the amazing arrest of Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew. First time a member of the royal family's been arrested since I think 1648 when they arrested Charles I, who was beheaded. But what I thought was so extraordinary was King Charles essentially said, "Yeah, nobody's above the law. We're going to, continue this." So the split screen between what's happening here, nothing, and what's happening in Great Britain around the world really affirmed because we thought we were the country that was the role model for no one above the law, and here we have the royal family in Britain saying, "Okay, not even we are above the law if it comes to somebody like Prince." And that was kind of an amazing moment, wasn't
It is. It is. And I mean, I think this guy's been doing some really bad stuff for decades, maybe like
it? During his life.
50 plus years.
Yeah, no, my sense is that Andrew, one of the reasons why there's so little sympathy for Andrew and why the royal family is so willing to throw him under the bus is because he has been a complete creep on so many levels for so many years, so entitled, so vicious. You can always tell who has friends and who does not have friends when they get in trouble. And you notice that there's no like rush of like, oh, poor Andrew, or
Hmm.
Andrew is being persecuted by his political opponent. None of that. Nobody is defending
Yeah,
this guy. And then Donald Trump,
a lot of these guys, and I mean, I think if this scandal had happened, it had hit Trump at a different point in his life, he would have been
mm,
in big trouble if he wasn't president, of course, which makes him immune to everything. But no, look, Harvey Weinstein, classic example. Like a lot of these guys who were wrapped up in this sort of story were just assholes in general to people.
yes.
I saw a clip the other day where like Jay Leno, who was the host of when he was host of the
Yeah.
Tonight Show, said that Harvey Weinstein would call him up and be like, "You need to have Brad Pitt on the show tonight." And like Leno would be like, "Well, we'd love to have Brad Pitt on pretty much any time, but we've got guests booked tonight, and we don't bump people. We're not going to bump people." And Harvey would just like ream him out. And so Jay Leno was like, "Yeah, when they took him down, I wasn't surprised, and frankly, I wasn't too upset about it." And it's like a lot of these guys, um, it's because they just really felt they had a sense they were above the law, and for many many years they actually were.
Yeah. And then that sense of entitlement leads to hubris, which has been a theme of many of our conversations here. And so Trump, Trump was out there last week, claiming, exoneration from the Epstein files. Yet last week was another reminder that unlike almost every other story in the last year, this one is just not
Yeah,
going away.
and
And
let
you
me
are
say,
starting to see the
Charlie,
blast radius in the private
yeah,
sector as well. The only protected universe is Trump world and his cronies and his buddies because he knows if he throws Howard Lutnick under the bus or anybody else, then he's acknowledging this is a terrible, terrible thing, and he cannot do that.
and the guy, the 20-some-year-old young man who was shot, I think
Oh,
shot and
that,
killed,
yeah,
right? Going into
yeah,
Mar-a-Lago. He was from a Trump voting family. And apparently the reports are he was radicalized by the Epstein file, by the whole failure to release the Epstein files and all of that. At least that's the early reporting. And so, I mean,
well, yeah,
obviously, we do not condone that sort of, and I guess we have to take the Secret Service at their word that what they say happened. They're not ICE, so maybe we can trust them that this guy came in there with a shotgun and a can of gasoline or whatever they're claiming he came in with. No reason to doubt that that's true. Um, but this, I think, is pretty clear that the Epstein story has it is a conspiracy theory that turns out to have certain elements of truth to it, and that there are people who are very disturbed and troubled by it. And it has, who knows where this is going to go, but like the fact that there was a guy from a Trump voting family who just went into Mar-a-Lago with a gun, reportedly, and that this was the issue that radicalized him, I think is maybe just indicative of how volatile this story still is
Right.
for Donald Trump.
Well, thank God, Kash Patel and the FBI will get to the bottom of all of it, because we can trust them to investigate. Okay, since you mentioned that, I know we have one last story. The other story that I hope that doesn't fall below the radar screens. Over the weekend, we found out that ICE had shot and killed another
Yep.
American, and
Yep.
they're now
No,
telling
wait, but
saying that,
Charlie, in fairness,
yeah,
it was
yeah,
defensive shots at a
yeah.
driver that was trying to quote that intentionally ran them over. So,
See, this
uh,
is the thing, though. If you've been lying as much as they have, do we give them the benefit of the doubt anymore? No, right? We don't know. But the one thing you don't do is just assume that they're telling the truth. And the thing about the shootings in Minneapolis, and somebody was making the point, I wish I had the number, how many people have been shot by ICE this year, in the last year? It's not just two people up in Minneapolis. There have been lots
yeah.
of shootings.
And then
And
people who've been like shot in the eye with,
yeah,
you know, whatever, like rubber bullets or tear gas and are blind
yeah,
or whatever,
yeah,
and then
right.
little kids separated from their families, deported in some cases.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, and so I mean, this story it is interesting that it took so long for us to find out that ICE was involved in this shooting. That raises questions in and of itself, whether or not there was an attempted cover up. Um, but the other thing that is really interesting to me, and I wish I had the numbers right in front of me, that you and I both know that it is extremely rare for federal grand juries not to hand down indictments if the Department of Justice wants it. I think the Department of Justice has, way north of 90% conviction rate. They can indict a ham sandwich. Basically, that's the cliche. And over and over again, this ragtag group of Pam Bondi loyalists have been rejected by citizen juries. So you want to talk about a turning point where the Department of Justice has forged its credibility with federal judges, with federal juries, and they are on an amazing losing streak that I don't think has any precedent in American history. And I think it's part of the fact that imagine being in the Department of Justice trying to recruit somebody right now. I mean, and by the way, the
yeah.
banner they hung up, the North Korean style
Oh my
banner with
gosh.
Trump's
We didn't even
face.
get to that. It's old news by
I know.
now.
Yeah.
It's strong North Korea vibes. Other dictators, of course, have done that sort of cult of personality thing as well.
But imagine trying to
But
recruit lawyers. Well, imagine wanting to be a lawyer. And so they have these lawyers who are, quite frankly, just completely incompetent. I mean, this administration, you and I would like to think that they're brought down by their extremism and everything. The incompetence, just
yeah,
the way in which they have destroyed, driven out centuries worth of talent and experience, and they're bringing in people like Lindsay Halligan who are failing over and over and over again. So the
well, that's why it
crisis,
becomes like the death of Stalin. Where you end up having people tell the dear leader what he wants to hear. Oh yes, this bridge will hold. It's
yeah,
and so you have like architects in the Soviet Union who were saying he wants to hear that this bridge is going to work. So we'll tell him it works. And then, of course, it doesn't. And so that is one of the ramifications of having an authoritarian leader is that you end up with these yes men and sycophants who oftentimes are not competent
yeah. And
and
that's the
think,
Achilles heel.
Yeah.
and that's where authoritarians fail, is because they create that bubble of shows around them who will always tell them they're right, who will never warn them, who will never tell them, what they need to know. And boy, doesn't that sound where we're at right now. So anyway, I don't know. Are you going to watch the State of the Union tomorrow night? You going to stay up late?
I think I am.
Late for me.
I think I'm gonna. But yeah, it's East Coast is not the place to be if you want to like, you get to be a certain age, and it's like the World Series starts late, the Super Bowls, like the debates, the State of the Union, and it becomes a judgment call. Like, is this worth it? Because
Well,
it's
it's 2 hours of Donald Trump talking in your head. That's my big question. Is like, am I going to sit there and have to listen to him? You
It's
know?
not edifying. It's not, and it's all bullshit too, right? I mean, he's
Yeah,
going to be
exactly.
lying the whole time, and it's not going to be
I know.
checked in real time. And so, do you want to do that to yourself? And then I'm not going to just watch it till 11 and then roll over and go to sleep. After all of that is going to be like an hour of heavy drinking. I'm like drinking like I'm Kash Patel to try to like clear my head and pass out after enduring that.
I would recommend starting before the speech.
If my tweets are a little strange, you'll know why.
Yeah, exactly.
Joey, always a
All right.
pleasure, man.
Next week, man.
All right. Subscribe, like, follow, all that good stuff. And we'll see you back here then. Thanks, guys. See you, Charlie.